What's up, design family, and welcome back to another episode of Fittdesign TV. So glad to have you guys back on the channel. On today's episode, we have a foolproof guide on how you create the perfect brand name. I see so many entrepreneurs when they're looking to start their own brands, they get caught up into what should I call this brand, and they really get hung up on this. Well, in today's episode, I'll be giving you guys 3 key criteria that you need to evaluate and follow in order to create the perfect brand name. A brand name that you can be confident with and ultimately one that represents the company that you're trying to build. So if you're interested in what these 3 steps are, well, watch this episode. You're about to find out. What's up, design family, and welcome to Fittdesign TV. So glad to have you here. On this channel, we discuss all things sports fashion, graphic design, manufacturing, and technology. We'll discuss key topics, answer pressing questions, and provide actionable steps on starting your own product line. If you're interested in any of the above topics, stick around. You're in for a good one. Getting right into the episode, the first step of any essential brand naming process is try to understand the type of name that you want. And there's 7 key categories of names or types of names that you want to consider. Number 1 is going to be the eponymous name type. These are, or what they essentially refer to is, a name that's based on a time, a place, a person. It's a name that has a direct correlation with an existing identity. These could be brands like Disney, which is obviously named after the founder, Adidas, or even Tesla. Number 2 is the descriptive name. This is a very bland but almost straightforward way of looking at your brand. And in some cases, it definitely works. Great examples of this are American Airlines, which obviously this is an airline operating in America, so it's extremely descriptive, but it works incredibly well in this case. Another option is the Home Depot, right? This is a store where you buy all sorts of goods that you need to refurbish your home or to make upgrades in your home. So having a descriptive name can work in your favor, especially when it comes to the industry that you're in. So bear in mind, not only should you consider the name, but also the industry that you're operating in. In some industries, having a more descriptive name might work in your favor, and in some industries, having that might actually work against you. The third category that we have to discuss is the acronymic name. This is essentially where the name is a series of letters, and these letters are derived from the longer or more extended version of the name. Some examples of this are GE, BP, KFC, and HSBC. So a specific example here would be KFC, which obviously stands for Kentucky Fried Chicken, or HSBC, which stands for the Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation, so on and so forth. This is a great option when you want the name to allude to something wider, but you want to compact it. The fourth category here is the suggestive category. This is a very interesting category to play in, specifically because it gives you a lot of bandwidth and creativity, right? You don't have to have a one-to-one description of what your brand name is and what you do. You can almost bring in a level of creativity here to create these subtle illusions. A good example would be Uber, Slack, Facebook, and even Pinterest, right? All of these brands, the name indicates to some extent what the brand does or what industry it's operating in, but it's not so in your face and so direct that it leaves no room for imagination. Number 5 is associative. So similar to the suggestive, when you associate, you make subtle allusions or subtle connections to wider concepts. A great example of this is Red Bull, right? Red Bull in itself is a Red Bull. But those 2 items together, the red brings in a level of power, impact, dynamicism. The bull, of course, we understand is a very aggressive animal. It's a very focused, laser-focused animal. All of this actually ties in perfectly to the category that Red Bull is in, which is in sports performance drinks. So here, you're essentially associating the redness and the bull with the aggression of this character, which actually does a perfect translation into the category that Red Bull operates in. Number 6 is the non-English brand name. So these are essentially names that are derived from other languages. And of course, a word of caution here, make sure that you know what this name means in the other languages that you're appropriating them from. These are obvious examples of these non-English names can be things like Hulu, Samsung, or even Lego. The last type of name that you'll definitely want to consider is the abstract name. This is honestly my favorite because creating an abstract name requires a level of finesse, right? You can't just create a name that has zero connotation to the type of brand that you're trying to create. What I love about brands like Rolex and even Kodak is that though Rolex means nothing, right? The name Rolex is not from the English language. It has this interesting connotation. You understand immediately that there's some form of timekeeping element in that name. At the same time, with a name like Rolex, it just lends itself to this luxury aesthetic. So bearing both of these things in mind, when you approach a brand name from an abstract sensibility, make sure that the sounds or the phonetics that you're incorporating actually have a strong incorporation to the brand and industry that you're in and the target audience that you're going after. So we've discussed the types of brand names or the categories of brand names that you can actually consider. Now, I mentioned there's 3 key points that you want to follow. What is the second? Well, in this case here, we want to outline 2 core things in our second point. Number 1 is you want to decide what you want your brand name to say, right? You figured out the category, but you want to know when people speak your brand name or when they read your brand name, what should it say? What information should it deliver? And we have almost 2 categories inside this point. Number 1 is going to be that this brand name, you want it to convey that it's being extremely descriptive and very functional. And there's 3 key examples of this. You can have something that the type or the description is that of the founder. A lot of brands, they use the name of the founder. So it's who created this brand. This could be something as simple as Dell, created by Michael Dell. You might actually want to consider what you do, right? A lot of brands, they have a very specific type of business that they perform in. And a good example of this would be something like Microsoft, right? They do software and almost like there's this microchip integration or this sort of connotation of the microchip. So combining micro and soft together just makes sense here. It has this very strong technological industry illusion. So what you do is also a great starting point towards creating that brand name. And then lastly in this category, where do you operate or which region of the world do you operate? Great example of this is extremely direct. It's Southwest Airlines, right? They started in the Southwest of the United States and that's where they grew from. So when it came down to their identity and their color palette and how they presented themselves as a Southwestern brand. So let's just say that you don't want to have a descriptive and functional name. You want to have something that's a little bit more detached and can leave your customers thinking. Well, a great way to go about this is by combining the idea of the brand with the emotion that you want to invoke. Great examples of this can be something like Nike, right? Nike, the brand, is based on the goddess Athena Nike, which is the goddess of victory, right? So Nike is all about winning. It's all about lapping the competition. This is a great example of bringing in the emotion of success, of victory, and using that as a springboard to create the brand name. Another example is something like Apple, right? Why would a technology brand be called Apple? Well, there's a simplicity in both the visual logo of the Apple and the actual name Apple. It just hits. And since Apple is all about simplicity, about just a user experience that is elevated from the rest, that is so unobstructed with the nuances of technology, Apple just makes sense. And lastly, you have something like Google, right? Google is a very interesting name because it's based off a mathematical term, right? But what the illusion here is that by having such a sort of outlandish name of Google, you almost start to envision the company as an extremely technologically advanced company. And obviously here, that is the association they're going for. Now that we figured out the type of brand name and we figured out what emotion or what sort of delivery you want to invoke, what's the next step? Well, the last step, and don't skip this step, is to make sure that this name is available. Understand the markets that you're looking to operate in. And if it's a name, make sure that you're getting it trademarked. I've seen so many companies skip this step, build a level of success only to have that come back and bite them later down the line. You want to make sure that once you come up with the brand name, that you trademark it, that you own the trademark and you own the trademark in the different regions you plan on operating in. And then you need to do your due diligence. If you've come up with your own brand name, right? Maybe it's a mixture of sounds or phonetics. Make sure that those sounds and those phonetics don't mean anything that you don't intend them to mean in other languages. The last thing you want to do is create a beautiful sounding brand name and then realize it means something completely different in a market that you plan on expanding into. Well guys, that is it. That is a wrap on this episode. So to recap quickly, how do you create the perfect brand name? Well, follow the steps that I've outlined in this video. Number one, figure out what type of brand name that you want to actually bring, right? There's 7 key types that we went through in this video, and definitely rewind and watch if you want to remember what they are. Also, understand what you want your name to say. Is it descriptive and functional, or are you trying to evoke an emotion? And then lastly, once you've come up with the perfect brand name, you've done all of this hard work, make sure that you do your due diligence and that you actually spend the time to trademark and to figure out that your brand means what you want it to mean in different regions in different countries. Guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider smashing a massive thumbs up. It really does help us out and it keeps us motivated to keep creating this content for you. Also, if you want to hop on a one-on-one consultation call with me personally, I hold limited slots every single week, so check the link in the description. And let's just say you're looking to start your own brand, or you want advice on branding or creating your own collection, or let's just say you're a fashion brand looking to scale and you're facing some issues. Well, I can definitely help you out with that. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Fittdesign TV. Until next week's episode, stay awesome.